Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle DiMarzo, the Curator of Education and Academic Engagement at the Fairfield University Art Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to a very special evening with Royal Rhodes, who's going to be doing a poetry reading related to one of the two exhibitions that we have on view right now in the Bellarmine Hall Galleries. This is Specimens and Reflections. Royal is going to explain a little bit about the project, which is a collaboration with Claudia Esslinger. Both he and Claudia are faculty. Royal is faculty emeritus in religious studies at Kenyon College, and Claudia is studio art faculty there. We are so delighted to have this show on view at Fairfield right now in conjunction with our Out of the Crest Vaults Women in Sacred Renaissance Painting exhibition, which is also on for exactly one more month. You have that long to see the show. If you don't know, the Crest Show, as we've been calling it, was co-curated with Fairfield University students. And we just spent the last half hour prior to this broadcast by trading some stories about the shape of Fairfield University since Royal, a member of the class of 1968, myself, a member of the class of 2007, and unseen to you, our producer is a member of the class of 2018. So we have multiple generations of Fairfield alumni involved in everything that we're doing this semester, which is a real testament to the power of Fairfield's Jesuit education. So as I said, Royal is going to tell you more about the project. We were so delighted when he reached out to us about bringing this to Fairfield. To give you a little bit of a sense of the installation, we are going to play a short 2-minute video that will give you a survey of the installation in the Bellarmine Hall Galleries. And then we'll turn it right over to Royal to start us off.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy that you've tuned in to hear this reading. I want to talk initially, though, about the project itself that is on view at Bellarmine Hall Galleries. It's called Specimens and Reflections, and it's a collaborative work between myself and a colleague, Claudia Esslinger, who teaches studio art at Kenyon College, where I had taught for about 40 years in the Department of Religious Studies. Claudia was the leader of a Kenyon in Rome program, and during that time, she took what she called photographic panoramas of churches, mostly in Italy, but also in Sicily. And then she digitally redid them. And so some of the shapes you've seen in the short video, and you'll see again as I read poems, were meant to give us a new way of viewing those interiors, to, you might say, trouble our viewing so that we look at them afresh. And that's what attracted me to do the poems I'm going to read as well, to see how the visual images really confuse and startle, and also give a new sense of dimensionality to those sacred interiors in Rome. Claudia asked if I would write poems to accompany her images, and I was thrilled to do it. And so I was able, at least in my mind, to revisit the churches and places in Rome and Italy that I had loved so much. And I just want to say a word of thanks to Michelle and Jesse for this evening and all the work that they've put into this presentation. But I also want to remember in a special way some of my teachers at Fairfield. Father John Louis Bond, who wrote the lyrics for the Fairfield alma mater. See the stag with cross of gold rears its undefeated head. For Father Robert Fisher Healy, a great classicist who taught me Catullus and Ovid and Virgil. For other professors that I had, too numerous to name. One that stands out is Walter Petrie Jr., who introduced me to the whole range of the humanities that was at the heart of the liberal arts education I received at Fairfield, who took the class to our first operas in the old opera house in New York City. And more recently, I've made contact with another teacher that I had, Jane Sachs Sutherland, who taught art history. And I've told her that I used her insights into the whole history of art in many of my later classes when I became a teacher. Another word of thanks to Jack Esslinger and my friend Stephen Kobesa. Stephen was a graduate of Fairfield also, who helped install this show. So what I'd like to do is just read a very brief, I guess you'd call it an artist statement. I guess all artists are required to do things like that. But I think it gives you at least a brief insight into what attracted me to this wonderful project. Through language, poets have hunted the holy and tried to domesticate what they think is knowable, but what may never be known, attempting to make visible the invisible. And somehow for me, walking into these often vast spaces, I sensed the mystery of the sacred outside my grasp. What we are always failing to understand is this mystery rewards us with absence, distance, and a greater silence. And yet I knew that in them was still a sacred presence. So we'll go to the first poem that I'll read. This is Santa Maria de Matires, the Pantheon, one of the most spectacular places in Rome. And I remember on visits being there and sometimes being the only person in there looking up at the open oculus above. A great yawning O an open oculus over our heads, an outlet to cool this ornate space, an arena of proud vistas of clouds, a sun gold rim of concentric circles, built of square coffers overcrowded, so old Olympians can still spy on us, giving this pantheon of nameless ones a God's eye view. As we look up into an overarching bowl of light in this half hemisphere, temple and tomb, as Lord Byron wrote, from Jove to Jesus, with its offsetting circular sightlines that are overseeing this spacious semisphere as loosely each word's first letter mirrors that opening as a visual onomatopoetic reference, obliging us now to reorient ourselves to our own origins of calloused hands, pouring this mass of oozing concrete as an outward ordering of this dome, an offering to honor obscure gods called omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient ones, now observed with saints, artists, oligarchs, as the orifice over us says, this is eternity, so that my outcast sense of myself obscures. It's wonderful to be in this church when it's raining and the water comes through the oculus. And many people see that as kind of heavenly tears coming down, but I think of them as tears of joy just being at that spot. The next poem will be San Andrea della Valle. This is the church that the great Italian opera composer Puccini wrote about in Tosca. If you haven't listened to Tosca, that's one of your assignments from this evening. Old ways for professors never die. There won't be a quiz, but you'll enjoy listening. Inside the darkness fills and empties all things of causes and conditions, as light within itself has worked a healing through a gesture needed to direct attention, to place a hand directly on a fevered brow, to remind by words and human touch that now and always it is lovely, loving, loved, until the emptiness breaks into light. This bird-like image contains a glowing dome, many meters overhead in this gaudy church, the size of a small cathedral for a village. And at the center of these apparent wings is a crossing of the lengthy nave and apse. As a brick drum bears a symbolic bright octet of windows, crowned by molded swags, for an elliptical dome made of hardy lead. Designed perhaps by Borromini's expert eye, we see how Andrew, the apostle, is displayed at the altar in a painted row of cinematic scenes, a brutal crucifixion on his iconic X-shaped cross, while on the lofty barrel vaulting, a sequence of the life of Mary, one conceived immaculate, while chalk white stucco angels pose and point. The artists show more human than as hieratic. In how many basilicas have I hunted mystery amidst the vivid art of cruelty and crucifixions, knives to the willing throats, a bonfire endured, and always a catching voice that I hear whisper, is God so angry always for such sacrifices? And in the dome, a vortex of ascending angels fill the air like little ones we keep in iron cages, while at Christ's feet, a warning says, do not kiss. Faith, it seems to me, is always written in the past tense, petitions lobbed to an address unknown, like when I wake from a heavy medicated sleep, only to see that the forgotten angels are all real, and see myself as on a treadmill at the gym, listening through earphones to the sets of music on my companion's playlist that was left behind. But here, the silence has an edgy, magic beauty. And here alone in Sant'Andrea, I can see for sure why Puccini set his opera of violence and desire with the jealous Tosca and her lover, Cavaradossi, who painted Tosca's rival in a chapel that is fiction. Tosca cries, rain down desire, you vaulted stars, as Scarpia, the villain, burns for her and sings at the Te Deum, you have made me blot out God. So great scene where Tosca knifes Scarpia to death. There's an alert. And says, E avanti a lui tremava tutta Roma. And with him, all of Rome trembled. Puccini caught that just right. The next slide, please. This is called Finding the Black Madonna in Santa Maria Monserrato del Spagnolo, the Church of the Spaniards. This altered image forms an arc in a golden lacquer in this Roman Montserrat, exalting Spanish piety. In the ceiling, glowing diamond shapes surrounding octagons are framed with victor's wreaths and ribbons on gold fields, fulfilling space triangles where windows open. The dome is lifted high by the gospel writers who give it radiating strength, a reminder nothing passes. Pagan herms are placed around a central oval with a central Christ in glory, adored by cherub faces. Rich, polychromed materials emphasize and ring the arches, symbols of the Virgin, while on the tympanum, the Father looks on us. Here, the Borgia Pope rests among the modern kings of Catholic Spain. The imposing painted cross at the high altar finishes where the ark of gold has led. An altar privileged for prayer, but hidden from our seeing are decorated chapel altars. One where James the Great, cause of the long Camino, poses like his brother Christ, with a sash of pilgrim shells. And nearby is a chapel where the Black Madonna occupies a golden throne, and she herself, the throne of wisdom, where her dark-skinned son is shown. We recall the lyric verses from the stirring Song of Songs. I am black and beautiful, needed now when Black Lives Matter. It's a reference to the Madonna of Montserrat in Spain, where Ignatius spent some time. And the image of Mary and the child is black. My Fairfield freshman year roommate, Tony Palumbo, was set to attend our 50th reunion. And he did what he had always wanted to do, make the Camino in the northern part of Spain to Santiago, the shrine of St. James, and died along the way, just as he would have wanted. The next slide, please. This is San Ignacio de Loyola, and this poem is called Questions in a Jesuit Shrine. Into this place, as if a garden, I come again in reverence for the deceased men of God in this grid of memorial tombs. It is a counter-Reformation opera in scenes of prison, rope, and torture, with martyrs in dramatic martyrdom. Here are black robes known as ours. At the close of the last day, will they, like us, want to see our own bodies in another surprising form, whatever being glorified can even mean? Now, within our noisy carnival of dread, do they all still weep as we often do, sleeping fitfully with the poetry of these markers? They taught us the meaning of the soul is the soul itself, and the turning womb of these, our graves, prepares a breech birth. When the angel musician blows a golden horn, and in a terrible twinkling, graves open up like missile silos, eyeing the last sky. Above these narrow holding cells, before moving to the main arena, where the wily lions have had all their piercing teeth removed, we learn the true task of the dead is to make new again what we once thought as only our ordinary rounds, but now to join in a live performance. Will each of us think in that new light? It resembles a vast wedding breakfast where we will serve other guests easily, freed from sorrow in this vale of tears. Next slide, please. This is from the original Jesuit church in Rome. There was a wonderful exhibition at the Bellman Art Gallery Museum in 2018 called The Holy Name. And so this is a reference to the name of Jesus. It's the place where Cardinal Bellarmine, the patron saint of Fairfield, is buried. His tomb is there. But if you have a chance to go back and look at the online art of Bernini and others that is displayed in that Fairfield exhibition, I really think you'd be richly rewarded. Il Gesù, a spiritual training. Anima Christi, the words that the soul of Loyola embraced in his life and his most fervent prayers, still enlivens Santissimo Nome di Gesù. The nave of the church is as dark as the world, where we stumble and battle with sickness and death, as the Christogram shield shows a starburst of bronze. I am trying to write about traces of natural light for my mind and my soul in a theater of questions and pain. Then why do I feel even now a resurgence of fire? Angels, the color of cumulus clouds, are the frame. this resplendent troublure of heaven that stretches with brushstrokes of shadows that glaze the polychrome marble. Their wingspans are floating and filling the spaces we know are now empty of time, with ambiguous borders, the solid or painted, a stagecraft that blurs both the holy and human. Mirrors are tilted to help me imagine within the high ceiling as my eyes have been opened for peering inside of a window of heaven, transporting me up or paradise close to a suffering world. The methods they used for effects were liturgical music, baroque and majestic, as the Tridentine Church stood triumphant, worshiping models of martyrs to answer by doubting beliefs. Using illusion, a hidden mechanics with engineered pulleys and cables, a deus ex machina wooden device, letting the saint appear for the wonder of pilgrims and tourists as night hastens on. The heel of religion has crushed every head of the heretic. Yet these triumphs conflict with the heart, formed in love, from deep in creation that bursts into being, proclaiming, Jesus. No exit exists that we know to escape from the terrors of life, or from seeing in ecstasy's face what can seem so disturbing. If only I found in my life, not my words, how to utter the ultimate word. The next image, please. This is Sanagnesian agone. It doesn't mean agony. This is the place at the Piazza Navona where there was the competition with chariot races and other things of combat. And this is a church designed by Borromini. His rival Bernini designed the great fountain of the four rivers in front of the church of Sant'Agnese. And the old legend is that the faces on the sculpture of the fountain turn away in disgust from the facade of Sant'Agnese because Bernini and Borromino were such rivals and not friends. But the Piazza Navona is one of the great central places of Rome now, where many tourists go. And if you go to Tre Scalini, located in the piazza, get a tartufo and you'll be in paradise with that chocolate deliciousness. But this begins as from a far country. Every day is a carnival in Piazza Navona, a Roman circus for first century agonal games. The four great world rivers meet in Bernini's artful fountain, at a reef for a copied obelisk, a watery theater in the round. The Fontana del Moro occupies the south of the square. Its naked moor wrestles a sculpted dolphin, and tritons spew a double stream of water. A famous director strolls slowly past, beside a stuttering beauty queen, and sat at an open-air cafe. I began this daily passeggiata amidst the buskers and fortune tellers, with my heart like a black meteor, the one the great Mother of God possessed, and screaming priests transported with dark rites as the empire failed. The diamond adrift in the sky was Venus, whose name Amor, inverted as Roma, was a cipher to live a life alone, like the martyr in Sant'Agnese in Agone. I sat close to that altar for Mass as an acolyte in a tailored surplice helped the elderly cleric step into place to offer the sacrifice, a sign death is a fruit with a stone. The walls show us young martyrs, their special symbols held by angels in niches that rise to semi-domes. The pews are filled with noontime piety, while worldly chatter almost drowns the long litany of repeated petitions, saying, "Save us, spare us, see us," and half expecting the saints to descend directly from their decorated shrine, lamenting a simpler, surer, certain time. I try my best to stand for a time outside my skeptical mind and to have sympathy for those needing some impossible things carried from a far country, once my own. The next slide, please. This is the Church of San Diego alla Sapienza, and associated with the study of law in Rome. This again by Borromini shows his fascination with mathematics, and the architecture speaks to that, as well as this altered image. The poem is entitled "Attend to Wisdom." I hear beauty speaking to me, as it spoke boldly long ago in ways before being here I could understand. Euclid is invoked more than angels, pure intellects, not here, that would call me to fly up, to fly beyond them. Here, geometry is the whole substance of all things, subtle and permanent, divinity inscribed in its perspective. From the computed visible to the invisible, its light is a ladder in gold and white, secure in the perfect geometry of itself. Focused on eternity outside of history, I am offered Pythagorean truth, untouched but by the syntax of the unsaid. Defamiliarized rondels and odd oblongs, not a simplified analog to the human, are a haven for a god of the mathematicians. Marble mountains where deities once lived were torn down, and the dressed stone is still filled with whatever once dazzled. Hands clutching a chain of lifted cell phones freeze the carved oak and acanthus capitals that have crafted an elegy in unyielding stone. To this cloud of unknowing, I cannot close my fixed eyes to the darkness of doubt, to be lost in the greater darkness of faith. The next poem, please. Next image, please. This is a wonderful little church, Santa Maria della Pace, that is close to and behind San Agnese. It's very difficult to get into. It's rarely open, and it's a total treat if you're in Rome and are able to gain access. I found the same thing true when I did some visiting in Athens on several occasions, trying to get into some of the churches and monasteries, which were mostly solidly locked up, especially to tourists. But then one year in Athens, during the great financial difficulty that Greece was going through, all the churches were open, filled with young people singing, and it was miraculous. There was no one singing in Santa Maria de Pace that I remember, but it is a magnificent gem of a church. The poem is called "The Mountain Shall Bring Peace," Psalm 72. I think of it as a petition for the age we live in. Like hands whose palms face up are open praying, this composition shows the cruciform vaulting that leads to the cupola with octagon coffers. Inside an octagonal dome whitened with light. It is as if God, a geometer or philosopher of reason, is revealing what reason does not know at all. Just as below are Raphael's sibyls, just a quartet, who are tutored by attendant angels holding slates. And at the utmost pinnacle is God, the one creator, the ancient of days, in place of the customary dove, who lifts high his blue-robed arms extended amidst angels hidden from our distant eyes. As if, like Noah, endlessly scanning the troubled sky for the return of the lonesome dove released in hope, as a testament that life at last had been renewed, while the divine war bow is now the rainbow of peace. This scene is deftly tucked back near Piazza Navona, where the young stampede to their ravishing music, and in peace we settle into our own body's paradise, if we are awake to it, and then die back into ourselves. Like this floating dome, we feel gravity as ordinary, a marvel we have no adequate words to request. And in the lofty lantern, instead of heaven with spangled paint or silver tinsel curtains, like some repeated 4th of July Americans expect, it shows what we made of life, knowing no one here. Can anyone be exiled from the very source of being, whether we search for it or always look away? How does a person of faith live in our world that sees that faith as a caricature of fear? How does a person of peace exist in a warring world if that world sees peace as a stand-in for weakness? How do we care for our home, the earth, sky, and sea, unless we see all that is living unites us as one? How does a person of love endure in this world if love is not free to utter each heart's plea for peace? Those are the poems related to the exhibition. I wanted to end, though, with another poem about being in Rome. And that was the magic for me of revisiting these sites through Claudia's images. That there were so many occasions of feeling placed, and that, as the Irish would say, you were at a thin place between heaven and earth. And so I wrote this poem called A Natural History of Rome. And I'll end with this one. They descend upon the eternal city over the egg-shaped domes of churches and the dissolving marble debris of empire. Light in the winter evening loses the soft yellow color of butter and bright lemons that bathe the monuments. A storm of starlings agitates the covens of stray cats and strollers crossing piazzas to escape the vast fouling that coats paving stones, cars, and the elegant clothes of Romans and rich tourists sheltering under open umbrellas. The sheer cloud of black specks, after consuming olives from trees in the countryside near here, sheltered from enemy owls. They are an ever undulating, sky-wide sculpture, floating gauze scarves, a murmuration falcons failed to root in exile. We walk gingerly, holding each other upon the slick steps, bound by the mildly chilly air and fear of falling apart. The starlings, startled by distress calls, municipal workers blast into treetops, flee, and the bleached sky is deserted. They looked like small clots of black blood, omens any ancient priest could have read in the arrhythmia of our hearts. If you have a chance, look at a Google image of the murmuration of starlings in Rome to get the full effect of what I've tried to describe in my words. But thank you so much. If there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to respond to them.
Well, thank you so much, Roy. That was beautiful. And I love the imagery that you ended on. I lived in Rome for a couple of years in graduate school, and the murmurations, and so beautiful to watch. The smell, a little bit less so, of the guano.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes, you see them in smaller numbers here in the United States, and it is such a wonderful, like, acrobatic thing to watch. It's truly incredible.
And you realize that beauty of the architecture and the art, but also nature in that great urban space has been timeless.
Hmm.
And that's another special part of being in Rome and thinking about those special places.
And the penultimate poem that you read, Santa Maria della Pace, first of all, I have never been inside, so I was very impressed both by Claudia and you having been in there, and then just such what a prescient subject to touch on, especially now as I know they're finishing up this environmental, COP meeting in Egypt, trying to decide how will we protect the world that we all share. That was just a wonderfully time to the day.
And looking back in history, there have been so many literary people and artists in Rome and Italy who have had that environmental sensitivity and how to both appreciate and preserve the beauty that they found themselves in. And I have some friends who are Benedictines, and I spent a sabbatical at a Benedictine monastery in Collegeville, Minnesota, and just surrounded by beauty, artwork and natural beauty. And I commented to one of the monks about that, and he looked at me and he said, "Of course, everyone has to daily be surrounded by beauty." And I said, you got something there.
And it's funny that obviously ideas of beauty have changed, or there have been dissenting ones. I mean, even to look at the sort of stripped down nature of Santivo versus some of the, I think you called Sant'Andrea della Valle gaudy, which, I mean, I can't quite deny. But I have two questions for you, and one of them is related to churches and one of them is related to literature. So start with the art that is my personal focus. If you had to choose one of the churches, that either one you've written about or just another building in Rome, and you had to pick only one you could go back to, what would it be?
That's hard. That's like asking a parent, which one is your favorite child? And I think I would like to go back to Sant'Agnese, um, just for its location in the Piazza Navona. But also it has special significance for me. A close friend was there one time, and she seemed to be going through some issues. And so she was at Mass and went to communion, and the old Italian priest who was distributing the Holy Communion went down the line of communicants and Cobra di Christi, and came to her and said, Cobra di Christi, then leaned close and in English said, broken for you.
Wow.
And I think those kinds of moments, link you to special places. You probably know the famous story of T.S. Eliot when he went with his sister and brother-in-law to Rome for the first time, and they went into St. Peter's, and his sister and brother-in-law were looking all around, pointing out, the artwork and stuff, and looked around and didn't see Eliot, and then looked over, and he was kneeling in front of Michelangelo's Pietà, striking his breast. So
Wow. No, I've not heard that. That's
so
that's
it's
great.
so we think of these places as repositories of great art, but they're also places of prayer and meditation and great music. And the Baroque churches that were built by and for the Jesuits, that was part of the Counter-Reformation menu, to have music, art, lighting, those mechanical pulley occasions when things would be hoisted and saints would be on view, and then and drama. Most people, again, fail to remember that it was the Jesuits in the court of the Sun King who perfected ballet
Hmm.
as a way to express divine and philosophical principles. And so women didn't dance ballet, but
Right. Well, since we are an art museum at a Jesuit university, trust me, we are frequently reminding everyone that yes, the Jesuits understood the power of art from the get-go.
exactly.
My other question, and we have had, although we have no questions in the live chat, we've had a flurry of thank yous for your reading, just being passed along from our producer. My other question was just about your literary preferences, and so you're an incredible poet as well as just speaking so strongly about your position of faith and looking at these churches. And I just wonder, is there a particular writer, whether a novelist or a poet, that you feel particularly drawn to?
I have a special regard for an American poet, Mary Oliver, who writes a lot about nature. She was based in Cape Cod for a number of years. And I had a idea that I would do a special project of retracing all of her steps in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where she had written a poem about that place. So I one summer went off to Cape Cod and was ready to follow that itinerary when I realized that I had forgotten to pack all of my books of Mary Oliver's poems. So I went to a little bookshop on the Cape and asked if they had any Mary Oliver poems. And they said, I think there's one or two. And there was, in fact, the 2-volume set of her selected poems. So I just grabbed them and ran back to my hotel and put them down. And I opened them up, and they had been inscribed by Mary Oliver to someone who
Wow.
would follow her steps. So I've been blessed with lots of
Yes.
wonderful moments like that. Of course, at Kenyon, great poets like Robert Lowell and Anthony Hecht and others, as well as visitors. But I remember it was at Fairfield where I wrote my first poem under the direction of Father Bond, who thought that everyone should be able to write a sonnet. And so he challenged us to come up with a topic, and he would write a sonnet in 15 minutes. And so he stepped out of the room, and the students, wrote on the board about 8 different topics, really outlandish things. And he came back in, looked at the board, went over to the window, and looked out the window for about 10 minutes. And we thought, it's not going to do it. And then quickly wrote a sonnet on the blackboard.
Wow. With good meter.
With good meter and beautiful musicality and stuff. And then circled each one of the 8 topics we had suggested that he had woven into the sonnet. So he said, you can do this.
Wow. Well, there's improv and then there's that. Well, thank you so much, Royal, for sharing your memories of Fairfield, your memories of Rome, your poetry. We thank you in absentia, Claudia, for contributing these extraordinary photographs. And again, I invite anyone watching who's in the area who can come to Fairfield University before December 17th. We are open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. We're always free and open to the public. And we hope you'll come and see these artworks and read, once again, Royal's poems in person. So Roy, thank you so much for this special evening, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.